in our own country.
Protesters have gathered in the city over the death of 14-year-old Kalgoorlie boy Elijah Doughty. Speakers pushed for Indigenous youth to be given a voice, angry over how they were portrayed at a violent protest last week.
Aboriginal people have got a righteous anger in this country, and I think what White Australia should be respectful of is the fact that our protests have always been peaceful.
Police have charged 7 people over last week's riot.
The actions of that man on the day in Kalgoorlie needs to be accountable. There is a very obvious bias in our judicial system, despite the laws that govern us. WA Police themselves have their very own Charter of Multiculturalism, Chapter 11 of the Criminal Code, which makes any person who engages in any conduct other than in private that promotes or increases animosity towards or a harassment of a racial group as being guilty of a crime. How is it that this man is not even guilty of that crime?
More than 200 people remembered Elijah Doherty with a minute's silence at a peaceful rally in Perth today. The protest was in response to the death of the 14-year-old who was allegedly run down by a youth last week. Many in the community are calling for the accused's manslaughter charge to be upgraded to murder. The protest featured many Black Lives Matter signs, a smoking ceremony and a performance by rapper Koolunger Budja. Liberal man Robert Eggington called out the West Australian government's response to last week's protests in Kalgoorlie.
The Western Australian Attorney-General, Michael Mission, has commenced to lay charges of the young people in Kalgoorlie, who he says started race riots and in the streets of Kalgoorlie. He seems to have been more focused on the young response to the death than the killing itself.
Our final presenter is Robert Eggington, Director of the Dumbartung Aboriginal Corporation. Robert has been instrumental in many rallies, projects, international and national campaigns concerning intellectual property rights, and has been active in the Noongar community for over 30 years. And we're going to hear a song called Kaya Kayana, written by Graham Dixon and performed by our nephew Joshua Fluent Eggington.
Listen to the stories as the elders again explain how your culture flourished before the Europeans came. Find why it's important your strength must never wane. Noongars need the spiritual like dry land needs rain. See contemporary traditional come together on stage. Guitars weeping, drummers thumping and angry's rage. Hurt, fear, frustration escape the poet's cage while haunting digits echo deep from a forgotten age. Observe the women dancing and weaving to sing a song. History's mysteries from whence your soul belongs. Forget urban landscapes, go back to where you were strong. Search for hidden answers from which your spirit belongs. Hear rhythmic black performance caused by crowds to sway. Soulful mesmeric lyrics put broken hearts on display. With words of hope and freedom offered a brand new day. As daylight kisses darkness, children laugh, dance and play. Our means to survive. For which Noongars strive. Our culture on display. Celebrating Indigenous way. Our means to survive. For which Noongars strive. Our culture on display. Celebrating Indigenous way. May our campfires burn forever.
Burn forever. I looked out over the first Kayana gathering in 1991, when at the centre of the gathering, the corroboree, we had a burning flame which represented all of our people who had died inside custodial institutions across this country. And in looking at the flame, from my mouth came the words that for 30 years has been the maxim for Dumbartung and has become known right throughout this country: may our campfires burn forever. As I look out here today, this is a massive rally, and it's good to see that there's people of all different racial and cultural backgrounds here. It's good to see that the Black Lives Matter mob have turned up. the CFMEU, Murdoch University mob. We've got concern in our community, and we've got a righteous anger as Aboriginal people, but of course we are a people of great dignity. So here we are today to give tribute to all of our young people who have died at the hand of brutality and racism in this country. Rest in peace, and he's not buried as yet, young Elijah from Kalgoorlie. But let's not forget the death by those in uniform and badges of a young 16-year-old boy in Roban all those years ago, John Pat. Let us not forget young Cleon Jackman. You can't even describe the torture when he was locked away in a basement at Maddington and by 4 members of the Ku Klux Klan, was brutalised beyond the media being able to give description of what they did to his body. Rest in peace, our little brother. Let's not forget that young 11-year-old girl out there at the Maddington Primary School that had a whole can of pepper spray sprayed into her eyes because she had a little pair of plastic cutting scissors waving around in the air. A whole can of pepper spray. And let's not forget all of our young people who every night as they venture out from their homes, our son was one of them, would catch the train systems with the brutality and the monsters that guard the systems called West Rail Security. They brutalise our young people in this city every night of the week. Perth is the most racist city in the most racist country in the world. As our communities plunge into darkness and into chaos, I would like to give our respects to the great northern tribes of the Yamaji nations, the Waru and the Bardi peoples, the Warman peoples of Turkey Creek in the Kimberley, the Larrakia, the Warlpiri and the Yolngu people of the Northern Territories, the Binthi and the Wandle tribes of Cape York, and the Lardle people of the Gulf areas, the Kalkadoon peoples and the Murray nations of the East Coast, and the great Gadigal peoples of the Eora nations, the Palawa people of the island of Tasmania, the Yorta Yorta and the Kuris of the eastern southern lands, our brothers and our sisters of the great nations of the Nunga people, the owners of Uluru, the Pitjantjatjara, the Arrernte and the Gurindji peoples, and the great nations of the Wongai peoples of the Western Desert Block. Our spirit is one with you. We stand united on the lands of our ancestors and the ceremonial grounds of the oldest culture on the most ancient landmass on the earth. Today our hearts bleed with you. We become one in spirit and one in our struggle to resist and to stay alive against all the assimilative attacks to destroy our bloodlines and our identity. We have entered a spiritual warfare, the last bastion of genocide. Before all is lost, we have little time left to fail. I give my respects to all the mothers and the fathers who have lost their children and have fallen broken and bleeding, finding a way through the darkness and the most painful suffering that can ever be inflicted on life. In the special bonds of realism that connects the special enlightenment of surviving that loss, the healing is within our will to accept the strength that prevails, the wisdom that changes our hearts forever as it dies inside of our very existence of flesh and blood. We understand your pain and we are in your shadows. Our cultural and our spiritual experiences gives us signs when we as Aboriginal people are about to be moved to either accepting unseen warnings or the visions to prevent the inevitable. The split in the universe that reveals that fate will never be determined by the mind nor the heart. It is not for us to know. As the jitty jitty dances, death falls all around us. One of the hardest things in life for our young people is to simply stay alive. The infant mortality rate and adult mortality rate for the life of Aboriginal people in this country compared to non-Aboriginal people is its greatest shame. The privileged, affluent white lifestyles that are founded on the minerals below Aboriginal lands wreak the impoverished existence of our bloodlines that trace back to the great Jidda, the first dawn of time, as we, the Bibbulmun people, merged from the granite foundations of the great Prongerups, the oldest granite formation on the earth that pinnacled the earth's surface 1,000 million years ago. Our people were forcibly dispossessed and disinherited from our ancestral lands by means of genocide, and the most violent Holocaust ever vexed against the human race of people on this planet. We have come to know the white man's ways. We have come to know of his brutality, his racism, his hatred and bitterness. Most importantly, we have come to know his trickery, deceit and lies, his expectation that turns to treachery, like fool's gold. As the richest per square metre of land on the planet, the Golden Mile, the super pit, now lays like the grave site for all humanity, whilst white Australia turned away from the plight of the Wongai people as they entered the extreme impacts of genocide and death. Many crossed the song lines and the circumcision lines that separated our laws for entry into Koolunger Budja, for needs such as health care and survival that now lay helpless in Wellington Square, in full sight from the windows of the State Health Department, the Department of Indigenous Affairs, the mental health officers, the Red Cross, the Save the Children institution, the Next Step alcohol and drug programs, and the Royal Perth Hospital, the Catholic Archdiocese Office, and the Cathedral. Sleeping cold on the wet grass and the brick-paved pathways as they who walk past turn away from the despair and the destruction of the lives of these once great people. Our leadership is broken, fractured and nullified. Our people pursue the elite academic government-appointed positions that are appointed by government to ensure that their policies of death are strategically carried out against our people, as institutionalised racism is embedded into every bureaucracy of the government. These so-called leaders are and have a real common similarity of the old black tracker that were once used on the killing fields, that were afforded the king plates,